She sold my DNA without consent, and then I played her confession at the family gathering. The silence was unforgettable. I never thought the smell of fresh bread could trigger a panic attack, yet there I was, standing in my own kitchen, trembling, heart racing, chest tight, just because the loaf in the oven reminded me of that night. The night Katherine looked me dead in the eyes at my father's birthday party and whispered, "If you don't comply, I'll swear under oath you did things that will end your career forever." It was 3:47 a.m. when I bolted awake from the nightmare again, drenched in sweat, my mind replaying her threat. I knew sleep wasn't coming back, so I sat at the edge of my bed, staring at the spare house key on my nightstand. That little piece of metal symbolized everything I'd lost: trust, safety, even my sanity. Let me back up. My name is Alexander. I'm 34 now, but this story really began years ago, when I was still trying to figure out who I was. My father, Kenneth, had me when he was just 17. People used to say we looked like brothers, not father and son. He raised me mostly on his own, and for most of my life he was my anchor. He worked brutal hours at the mechanic shop, always smelling faintly of motor oil mixed with pine air freshener from the shop's waiting room. Despite the grind, he never missed a single one of my birthdays. That's why, when I turned 30, I promised myself I'd throw in the biggest birthday party when he hit 39. He deserved it. I spent weeks planning, calculating costs down to the last cent. I still remember the $89 grocery bill from the bakery running cakes, bread, pastries, all for him. The house smelled like happiness that day: yeast, sugar, butter. The kind of smell that used to mean safety. Enter Katherine. She was my daughter-in-law, though I hate using that word now because it implies some bond that never truly existed. Katherine had this presence. Commanding, sharp, like she walked into every room already knowing she controlled it. She was 45, older than me, older than my father. That fact alone used to make neighbours whisper, but Katherine thrived on whispers. She liked being talked about. At first, I thought she was protective of the family. She'd check in often, asking me about work, my dating life, my health. But her questions had edges: too sharp, too personal. "Are you keeping any secrets, Alex?" she'd ask, tilting her head with that smirk. Secrets ruin families, you know. I laughed it off, not realizing she was laying the foundation for something darker. The first red flag came at that birthday party. Kenneth was surrounded by friends, beer in hand, smiling like a teenager again. Laughter filled the house, drowning out my own thoughts. I stepped into the kitchen to grab more bread, and Katherine followed me. She closed the door softly, her perfume sweet but suffocating, mixing with the smell of the warm loaf I'd just pulled from the oven. That's when she leaned in, her lips barely moving as she hissed, "If you don't do exactly as I say, I'll testify under oath that you hurt me. Who do you think they'll believe, me, a mother, or you, a single man with no one to vouch for you?" I froze. My throat went dry. "What are you talking about?" I whispered back, terrified someone would hear. Her smile was terrifying in its gauntness. "Don't play dumb, Alex. You've got too much to lose. I could end your career overnight. All it takes is one word in court. One word." And then, just like that, she walked out, rejoining the party as though nothing had happened. Kenneth laughed, people cheered, and I stood there with the bread in my hands, my world quietly cracking apart. That night, I didn't eat. I couldn't. Every bite would have tasted like betrayal. I tried to tell myself I imagined it. Maybe it was the stress of hosting. Maybe I misheard. But when I went to bed, the panic attack started. My chest tightened, my hands shook, my mind replayed her words in endless loops. The trauma rooted itself inside me that night, though I didn't know it yet. When I walked down the street the next morning, neighbours smiled politely, but I swore I saw them whisper once I passed. Maybe paranoia. Maybe not. That's the cruelest part of psychological warfare. You start doubting even your own senses. The first red flag had been planted, and it was only the beginning. After that birthday party, nothing felt the same. The house still smelled like pine air freshener from the plug-in Katherine had gifted us, but instead of comfort, it made my stomach knot every time I caught a whiff. Scents can trap memories, and for me, that cloying pine became the smell of fear. Katherine didn't need to repeat her threat, she had already planted the seed. But she did keep tightening her grip in subtler ways. She began inserting herself into my routines. If I left the house, she knew. If I came home late, she'd send a message: "Hope you're not hiding anything, Alex." The spare house key that I'd given my dad for emergencies. Somehow, Katherine had one too. I didn't even know when she'd copied it. One evening, I came home from work, opened the fridge, and found my leftovers rearranged. Not missing, just moved. At first, I thought maybe I was being paranoid, but then I found a sticky note on my counter that read, "Secrets spoil faster than food." My hand shook so hard I dropped it on the floor. I wanted to talk to my father about it. Kenneth had always been my safe place. But when I tried, he just shook his head. "Son, you're working too hard. Stress makes you imagine things. Katherine wouldn't do something like that." He said it with such conviction that I almost believed him. Almost. But I couldn't shake the cold sweat on my back every time Katherine's eyes lingered too long. When I turned 30, just a few years before all this, I remember making a silent promise to myself I would live honestly, build a career I was proud of, and never let fear dictate my choices. I kept replaying that memory, contrasting it with the man I'd become: paranoid, anxious, and constantly looking over my shoulder. Fear had wormed its way into every part of me, and it was her doing. The panic attacks grew worse. They would come out of nowhere, sometimes while I was at work, sitting in meetings trying to look normal while my chest felt like it was being crushed by an invisible fist. I'd excuse myself, splash cold water on my face in the bathroom, and pray no one noticed. But people did. Colleagues started whispering. I'd hear fragments: "Something's off with him. Is he unstable?" That reputation followed me, even when I tried harder than ever to appear composed. And then came the first sign that Katherine wasn't acting alone. I'd been going to therapy, trying to manage my insomnia and panic. My therapist, Dr. Holloway, was this calm, middle-aged man with glasses who always smelled plenty of coffee. I trusted him with things I couldn't tell anyone else: the nightmares, the way I flinched every time the doorbell rang, how I sometimes sat in the dark for hours holding the specky in my palm like a talisman. He nodded, wrote notes, and told me healing would take time. But then one night, Katherine slipped. She made an offhand comment during a family dinner. "How's the insomnia, Alex?" Still pacing around at 3:47 every morning. My fork clattered against my plate. My throat closed up. The only person I had told that exact time to was Dr. Holloway. That's when it hit me like a freight train. My therapist was reporting back to her. I felt physically sick. Betrayal burned through me like acid. Therapy was supposed to be safe, confidential, and now it was another weapon Katherine used to control me. She knew my triggers, my secrets, my weakest points. I couldn't sleep that night. Every creak of the house felt like surveillance. The more I pulled at the threads, the more tangled everything became. My lawyer at the time, a man named Dalton, was supposed to help me with some unrelated contract work, but even he seemed off. He'd forget to file paperwork, miss deadlines, and constantly pressure me for more money. One evening, I overheard him on the phone outside the courthouse, laughing. "Yeah, don't worry, I'll keep him busy." Busy with what? I couldn't prove anything, but the pattern was undeniable. By this point, the neighbours had stopped pretending. Whenever I walked by, conversations hushed as lingered, whispers floated. I overheard one woman mutter, "That's him, right, the one she said might be dangerous." My blood ran cold. Katherine was poisoning the well, drip by drip. My world was shrinking. My career was faltering, my sleep non-existent, and my trust shattered. The bread I once loved to bake sat untouched in my kitchen because even the smell made me nauseous. The pine scent clung to my clothes, my hair, my skin, until I wanted to scrub myself forward just to escape it. And still, I told myself, maybe it'll pass. Maybe she'll stop. But I was wrong. I hadn't even begun to uncover the true horror of what Katherine was capable of. The breaking point came not with Katherine's threats, but with what I discovered about myself, something so vile and unreal that, at first, I thought I was hallucinating. It started with a medical bill. I'd gone to donate blood at a community drive, just to feel useful again, when the nurse frowned at the screen. "How looks like you've had multiple egg retrieval procedures recently," she said casually, scrolling. I blinked. "Egg retrieval? That's impossible." She gave me a confused smile. "Well, your records are flagged. Maybe it's a clerical error. You should check with your physician." I left the clinic shaking so hard I could barely start my car. I didn't even remember driving home. All I could hear was the phrase echoing, "multiple egg retrieval procedures." At first, I thought maybe Katherine had stolen my identity. Ford, maybe. But as I dug deeper, calling hospitals, demanding records, I realized it was worse. My DNA had been sold. My genetic material had been harvested without my consent. Months, maybe years, of legal battles would follow, but the truth was undeniable. Katherine had orchestrated a way to profit from me, body and soul. I felt taller, like I wasn't even human anymore. Just inventory. When I confronted her, she didn't deny it. She smiled, sipping her wine like we were discussing the weather. "Oh, Alex, you're so dramatic. Do you know how much money this brought in? Do you know how many families needed what you had? You should be thanking me." "Thanking you?" My voice cracked. "You violated me. You stole from me." Her eyes glittered. "And what will you do about it? Go to the police, tell them I stole something intangible. I'll stand in court and tell them you agreed. I'll swear you begged me for money, and I helped. Perjury is just a word, Alex, but I'm believable. You're not." That night, I smashed a glass in my kitchen. My hands bled, and I didn't even care. I curled up on the floor, sobbing like a child. Trauma wasn't just in my mind anymore, it was in my body. In my blood. In records I couldn't erase. The nightmares worsened. I dreamed of doctors strapping me down, of needles piercing skin, of Katherine whispering in my ear while I screamed. I'd wake at 3:47 a.m, gasping, drenched in sweat, heart pounding like a war drum. My chest hurt constantly. Sometimes I thought I might not survive another panic attack. The cruelest twist. My therapist, who I'd stopped seeing after Katherine slipped up, called me one evening. "Alex, I just want to make sure you're stable. Katherine worries about you." My stomach dropped. Worries about me. She had him wrapped around her finger. My therapy wasn't for me, it was reconnaissance for her. I realized then that even my healing was weaponized against me. I felt trapped in a labyrinth with no exit. And then, like a final nail in the coffin, Dalton, my so-called lawyer, revealed his true colors. In court documents, I found discrepancies. Money that was supposed to cover legal fees was reverted. When I confronted him, he sneered, "Do you know how much Katherine paid me to drag this out? You're just a paycheck, Alex, nothing more." Everywhere I turned, betrayal. And the community? They ate it up. Rumors spread like wildfire. Some said I was unstable. Others whispered I'd been caught doing things Katherine hinted at. Once, walking home with groceries, I still remember the total was $89 again, some cosmic joke. I heard a teenager mutter, "That's him, don't make eye contact." I wanted to scream, to beg someone to believe me. But isolation was complete. My career ended quietly. My boss encouraged me to resign, citing concerns for the company's reputation. My friends stopped calling. Even Kenneth, my father, distanced himself, caught in Katherine's web of manipulation. I sat alone most nights, clutching the spare house key like it was my only anchor. A reminder that once my home was safe. Now it felt like a prison. And yet something inside me refused to break completely. Maybe it was rage. Maybe it was the memory of the man I promised myself I'd be when I turned 30. But one night, staring into the dark, I realized if Catherine's power came from silence and whispers, then the only way to fight back was with truth. So I started recording. Every conversation, every slip, every smug confession she thought no one would ever hear. I built a case brick by brick, fueled by insomnia and fury. Because if she wanted to destroy me with lies, I'd burn her empire with her own words. I didn't plan the confrontation, it planned itself. For weeks, maybe months, I carried my phone everywhere, thumb hovering over the record button like it was my only weapon. And slowly, Katherine gave me what I needed. She was arrogant, careless in her cruelty. One night, while sipping wine in the living room, she leaned back and sighed. You know, Alex, if you'd just stopped fighting, none of this would have been necessary. The lawyers, the lies, the harvesting. I mean, really you should be grateful. People paid good money for you. My hand shook, but I kept my phone steady under the table, recording. Another time, she whispered when Kenneth wasn't in the room, I could ruin you tomorrow if I wanted. One word, Alex. One word under oath. You'd be gone. Click. Saved. I built a library of her venom, and the more I gathered, the clearer my plan became. The opportunity arrived at Kenneth's 41st birthday party. 2 years had passed since the first threat in the kitchen. 2 years of nightmares, panic attacks, insomnia, therapy betrayals, and whispers in the neighborhood. At them, I was a shell of who I used to be. But something inside me burned hotter than fear. I need to finally show the truth. The house was full again, friends, neighbors, even family I hadn't seen in months. The smell of fresh bread filled the air, though now it twisted my stomach. Kenneth looked happy, laughing with a beer in hand, but I noticed a fatigue behind his smile. He'd been caught in Catherine's orbit too long. At around 8:30 p.m., when the chatter was loudest, I stood up. My heart pounded so hard I thought I might collapse. My palms were sweaty, my throat dry, but I forced my voice out. Everyone, can I have your attention? Conversations trailed off. Forks froze midair. Even Katherine tilted her head, eyebrows arched in mock amusement. What is it now, Alex? She purred. I took a deep breath, pulled out my phone, and connected it to the speaker system Kenneth used for music. My fingers trembled, but I pressed play. Her voice filled the room. If you'd just stopped fighting, none of this would have been necessary. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Kenneth's smile vanished. The lawyers, the lies, the harvesting. I mean, really you should be grateful. People paid good money for you. Someone dropped a glass, it shattered against the floor. A neighbor muttered, Oh my God. I could ruin you tomorrow if I wanted. One word, Alex, one word under oath. You'd be gone. And then silence. The kind of silence that hums heavy and suffocating. My chest heaved. Tears stung my eyes, but I held my ground. Catherine's face went pale, then flushed crimson. She shot to her feet, pointing a shaking finger at me. You manipulated those recordings. He's lying. He's unstable. But no one moved to defend her. People looked away, ashamed, guilty for ever believing her whispers. Kenneth's hands trembled as he reached for the table, steadying himself. Kate, his voice cracked, raw with betrayal. Tell me this isn't real. She sputtered. It's taken out of context. Context? Kenneth's voice rose. Context for selling my son's DNA without his consent, for threatening perjury, for ruining his life? The room erupted. Neighbors demanded answers. Some were crying. One woman said, I defended you, Katherine. I told people Alex was fine. God, I'm so sorry. I could barely breathe. My chest was tight, my body buzzing with adrenaline. But I felt something I hadn't felt in years, vindication. Within minutes, someone had called the police. Katherine tried to storm out, but Kenneth blocked the door. For once, he was standing with me, not against me. His face was wet with tears, but his jaw was set. When the officers arrived, I handed them my phone. It's all here, I said, voice shaking. Every word, every threat, every crime. Catherine's calm mask cracked completely when they cuffed her. She thrashed, screaming, You think this ends me? You have no idea who I'm connected to. You're nothing. Alex, nothing. Her words echoed even as the door slammed behind her. The stunned silence returned, broken only by Kenneth whispering, Son, I'm so sorry. In that moment, I realized the horror wasn't over. Her last words lingered like a curse. She wasn't acting alone. There was something bigger in network pulling strings behind her. But for the first time, people believed me. For the first time, I wasn't alone. You'd think Catherine's arrest would have brought relief that I'd finally sleep, finally eat without nausea, finally walk through my neighborhood without shame. But the reality was messier, darker. The night after the confrontation, I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, the spare house key clutched so tightly in my fist it left red grooves in my palm. My body was buzzing, raw from adrenaline. I expected victory. Instead, I felt hollow. At 3:47 a.m., I sat up gasping, heart hammering, certain someone was in the house. Every creak made me flinch. Even with Katherine behind bars, the fear didn't leave. The trauma had rewired me. The days that followed blurred together. At the grocery store, I tried to buy basics: bread, milk, eggs, but my card declined. Legal fees, therapy bills, and Dalton's manipulations had drained me. The receipt in my pocket mocked me, $89 again. The cashier gave me that look of petty house suspicion. I mumbled something about a mistake and left the bag behind, humiliated. Neighbors no longer whispered, they stared. Some avoided me, embarrassed they believed Catherine's lies. Others looked at me like I was contagious. I overheard one man mutter, he must have done something if he got that far. Stigma clung to me like a second skin. My career was gone. Officially, I'd resigned, but word had spread. Prospective employers would smile politely during interviews, then ghost me. My name was tainted. Online forums buzzed with half-truths and rumours, some seeded by Katherine long before the arrest. A dangerous, unstable manipulator. Even strangers had opinions about me. At home, insomnia turned my nights into torture chambers. When I did sleep, nightmares dragged me back into hospital rooms where needles pierced my veins, or into courtrooms where Katherine stood smiling while the judge declared me guilty. I'd wake choking on my own breath, drenched in sweat, shaking so violently I thought my heart would give out. Panic attacks became daily. Sometimes I'd collapse on the kitchen floor, paralyzed, convinced I was dying. I went back to therapy, this time with a woman named Dr. Chen. I didn't trust easily anymore, so I tested her. I told her a detail I hadn't shared with anyone, something small but specific. Then I waited. Weeks passed. Katherine didn't use it against me. Relief washed over me, but trust came in drops, not floods. I don't even know who I am anymore, I told Dr. Chen one session, twisting the spade key in my palm. You've been dehumanized, she said gently. Your autonomy was stolen, your reality manipulated. That doesn't define you, but it explains why you feel like a ghost in your own life. Her words cracked something open. I cried loud, casual sobs I hadn't let myself release in years. Still, recovery wasn't linear. After Katherine's arrest, the criminal network she hinted at began to surface in fragments. Articles appeared about shady fertility clinics, about missing biological materials. Reading them sent me spiraling confirmation that my nightmare was part of something bigger, scarier. It wasn't just Katherine. It never had been. And then came the second wave of betrayal. Dalton, my crooked lawyer, quietly fled down after Katherine's arrest. He'd been paid off, but by who? I never got an answer. Every revelation made the world feel less stable, less real. I walked through life like it was a simulation designed to brick me. Even Kenneth, my father, though he finally believed me, wasn't enough to anchor me. One evening, he came by with a loaf of fresh bread from the same bakery where I'd spent $89 at first party. He set it on the counter and said softly, "It's just bread, Alex. Don't let her take this from you too." I tried. I really did. I tore off a piece, but the smell hit me like a punch. My chest tightened, my throat closed, and I bolted to the bathroom to vomit. Kenneth's face fell. He understood then it wasn't about bread. It was about the fact that my entire sensory world had been colonized by trauma. The lowest point came 3 months after Katherine's arrest. I woke at 3:47 a.m. again, pacing the living room. My mind raced. What if she got out? What if the network came after me? I picked up the spare house key and pressed it so hard against my wrist it left an angry mark. The thought scared me how close I'd come to giving in. I told Dr. Chen about it the next day. Her eyes softened. "That's not weakness, Alex. That's your body begging for relief. But you survived the night. That means something." For a long time, survival was all I had. Not living, just surviving. But even in that pit, even when neighbours whispered and panic ruled me, a spark remained. Because deep down, I knew Katherine had tried to erase me. The network had tried to commodify me. But I wasn't gone yet. And one day, I'd be more than a survivor. The thing about rock bottom is this: once you hit it, you either stay there or you claw your way out. For months after Katherine's arrest, I hovered at the edge. Panic attacks, insomnia, whispers from neighbours, it all felt endless. But one session with Dr. Chen changed everything. She looked at me across her quiet office, the faint scent of jasmine tea replacing the pine air freshener that haunted me. "Alex," she said, "you've been forced to live in a story they wrote for you. What would it look like to write your own?" Her words burrowed into me. That night, at 3:47 a.m. my cursed hour, I sat at my desk, staring at the spare house key. Instead of clutching it like a talisman, I placed it flat on the table. And I wrote. For the first time, I poured out everything. Katherine's threats, Dawson's betrayals, the neighbours' whispers, the horror of learning my DNA had been sold without consent. I wrote until the sun rose, until my hand cramped, until the smell of fresh bread from a bakery down the street drifted through the window and didn't send me running. The writing became a lifeline. But more than that, it made me realise something. If my pain had been weaponised against me, maybe it could be transformed into a weapon of healing for others. I made a decision that scared me. I went back to school. At 34, sitting in a classroom again felt surreal. I was older than most of my classmates, my hair already showing flecks of grey, my body buzzing with anxiety every time I had to introduce myself. But I pushed through. I studied psychology, trauma counselling and forensic mental health. I wanted to understand how manipulation and legal abuse worked, not just for me, but for anyone trapped in webs like Katherine's. Money was tight. I lived frugally, cutting corners wherever possible. I remember one week when my grocery bill came to exactly $89 again. Instead of letting it mock me, I laughed. "Full circle," I muttered in the checkout line, and the cashier gave me a weird look. But inside, I felt powerful. The number no longer owned me. Therapy remained a constant. Dr. Chen helped me untangle the trauma symptoms that had become second nature, the insomnia, the hypervigilance, the trust issues. We worked through grounding techniques. I learned how to slow my breathing during panic attacks, how to separate the smell of pine from the memory of Katherine. It wasn't perfect, but slowly, I reclaimed pieces of myself. Socially, it was harder. The neighbours still whispered, though softer now, like they weren't sure what was true anymore. Some avoided me, embarrassed they'd been complicit in the rumours. Others eventually apologised. One woman stopped me at the mailbox, tears in her eyes. "I'm sorry, I believed her. I should have known better." I nodded but didn't answer. Forgiveness, I learned, didn't have to be immediate. The biggest moment of healing came with Kenneth. One evening, he sat across from me at the kitchen table, his eyes red-rimmed. "Son," he whispered, "I should have believed you from the start. I failed you." I reached across the table, placing the spare house key in his hand. "You're the reason I'm still here," I said. "You didn't fail me. We both got trapped." We cried together, two grown men bound by scars but still breathing. Years passed. I earned my degree, then my certification. The first time I sat across from a client, another survivor of psychological manipulation, I felt a shift. They were trembling, eyes starting like mine once had. I leaned forward, speaking words I'd once needed to hear. You're not crazy. You're not alone, and this doesn't define you. That moment meant everything. I'd been through hell so I could map the way out for others. Today, at 34, my life doesn't look like the one I imagined when I turned 30. My old career is gone. My reputation in my old community is shattered. But in its place, I have something stronger: purpose. I keep the spare house key on my desk still, but not as a symbol of fear. It's a reminder. A reminder that safety can be taken. Yes, but it can also be rebuilt. Katherine thought she destroyed me. The network thought I'd vanish. But instead, I became a counsellor. I stand beside others who have been gaslit, silenced, betrayed. I help them rewrite their stories, just like I wrote mine. And every time I hear the whispers of doubt, I think of Katherine's last words, that I was nothing. I smile now, because I know the truth. I'm everything she tried to erase.